Okay, so please continue to fill in closely so we don't have people standing in the back. And I'd like to introduce our next speaker. So Adam Smiley Poswolsky. He goes by Smiley. You'll see soon why. So he is an author and a TEDx speaker on a topic that, based on our registrations, we surveyed you a little bit, and we know that there's a fair amount of us in the room who would maybe consider themselves a millennial. And so Smiley has dedicated his career, and he has written a book on, let me make sure I get this right, is the Quarter Life Breakthrough. Not crisis, the breakthrough. He says it's a lot more fun. And he's going to talk about a purpose-driven workforce. And what you don't get to hear from Smiley today, I also want to encourage you to watch his TEDx talk, because it definitely gave me a little bit of a re-inspired motivation about where I'm at with my own career. And so please, welcome to the stage, Smiley.
Thank you all so much. It's so great to be here. Thanks to Hung for having me. I came to this event last year, and I saw my friend Jessica Simon speak, and I talked to Hung after. I was like, I got to be there next year. I really want to speak. And he's like, we'll talk, we'll talk. So I'm so glad to be here, grateful for all of you. By a show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of the term quarter-life crisis? Okay, keep your hand raised if maybe you're going through a quarter-life crisis right now, or if you're over the age of 30 like I am, and maybe it's a third-life crisis, or a midlife crisis. Okay, my mom is 64. She thinks she's having a quarter-life crisis. So if you had your hand raised, you are not alone. Let me repeat that, you are not alone. The truth is that 70% of Americans are disengaged at their jobs. 70%. 1/5 of those people are so disengaged, they're actively undermining their coworkers' work. They're literally getting paid by their company to mess things up for that company. Now, this should be a concern to those of you in the room that are supervisors, because you're paying people to mess things up for everyone. But I actually think it should be a concern to all of us, because it means that millions of people are waking up every day depressed, unhappy, unfulfilled, not showing up fully for themselves, their families, their communities, or the world at large. Think about the impact those people could be having on the world if they were actually doing meaningful work, if they were actually doing something they cared about. Now, I care a lot about this statistic because a few years ago, I was one of those 70%. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, which is a great city, working a job that on paper was great. I worked for the U.S. Peace Corps, and on paper, everything was perfect. I was making $70,000 a year. I had job security. I had benefits. You literally cannot get fired from working for the United States federal government. Trust me, there are people that should. I go to happy hour, tell everyone, hey, I'm the special assistant to the director of global operations at the U.S. Peace Corps. And they're like, oh my God, that's so cool. Let me get your business card. My parents were impressed. My friends were impressed. My boss was impressed. Everything was perfect about my job except for one tiny, kind of important thing. I was miserable. How did I know I was miserable? Every single morning when my alarm would go off at 6:30 in the morning to NPR, I'd feel a shooting pain go up and down my back. I felt it when I got out of bed, when I went to brush my teeth, when I put on my suit and tie, when I took the bus down 16th Street to work, when I scanned my ID badge in at the office, when I rode the elevator up to the 8th floor, when I was sitting in meetings, typing memos and talking points and talking about best practices, when my boss would email me every single night without fail on my BlackBerry at 10 p.m., the pain was so bad it actually turned into shingles on my side. Now, shingles is a stress-related nerve disease common among people over the age of 70, not 20-somethings. Right? And I knew I needed to make a change, and my doctor told me I needed to make a change. And it was during this period that I was spending a lot of time on Facebook, overdosing on FOMO, fear of missing out, worried about what my friends were doing. So there was my friend that was off to get his MBA, and I was like, maybe I should go to business school. There was a friend who was becoming a teacher, and I was like, maybe I should become a teacher. There was a friend that was opening her own food truck, and I was like, maybe I should open my own food truck, even though I'm a really bad cook and an even worse driver. And I saw a buddy of mine that I went to college with, and he had already graduated one of the top law schools in the country, and got a job at an amazing corporate law firm, making well over 6 figures. And there he was, traveling with his girlfriend in Peru, proposing at sunset in front of Machu Picchu. And I'm like, man, this guy, he's got it all figured out. He's making all this money. He's got a sweet job, sweet apartment in New York. He's getting married. I hate my job. I hate my life. I can't even get a date on OkCupid. My life is ruined. I'm done for. And the truth is, it was only when I met other young people going through the exact same thing I was, minus the shingles, that I was able to turn this quarter-life crisis into a breakthrough. So today I'm going to tell you a few lessons I learned on my journey that can help anyone find meaningful work and can help all of you encourage your employees, especially millennials, to find meaning in the workplace. So the first lesson I learned on my journey is that you have to find believers. You have to surround yourself with people that believe in the beauty of their dreams. Because I used to come home every night when I was in DC to my roommate, Dan. I'd be like, Dan, I don't like my job. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live in DC. I want to get out of government. I want to move across the country to California, to San Francisco. I want to become a writer. I want to surround myself with social entrepreneurs and young people going after their dreams. And Dan would kind of look at me, roll his eyes, take a swig of beer, say, Smiley, suck it up. Everyone hates their job. It's part of life. And I was like, man, suck it up. You know, I was 28 at the time, which is old, but not that old, right? I didn't want to spend the next 30 years of my life depressed. But the truth is, the majority of the world thinks like Dan, right? That's why 70% of Americans are disengaged at their jobs. 70% of people say, suck it up. It's your job. Right? And then I went to a program called Starting Block, the Starting Block Institute for Social Innovation, which brings together young people, 20-somethings, 30-somethings, that are interested in using business for good, interested in social entrepreneurship, interested in changing the world. And there I met believers. I met people like Debbie. Debbie was starting Goldie Blocks, which is a toy company that teaches young girls engineering skills. I met people like Ted. Ted started MoneyThink, which is a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy and entrepreneurship to urban youth. I met people like Tom. Tom started Rising Tide Car Wash with his father, which is a small business in Florida that employs people with autism. So I met people like Debbie and Ted and Tom, and they were like, wait a second, Smiley. You want to move across the country? You want to start writing? You want to start supporting social entrepreneurs? You have to do that. Because if you don't do that, who else is going to do that, right? Because the crazy thing happens when you find believers, you also find accountability. So people like Debbie and Ted and Tom, they weren't talking about making lots of money. They weren't talking about rising up the corporate ladder. They weren't talking about getting featured in Fast Company. They were talking about how they can make the world more innovative, more compassionate, more sustainable. They were talking about how they could use their access, their skills, their privilege to empower those less fortunate. So we hear in the media all the time, this is the lazy generation. This is the entitled generation. This is the me generation. I think that couldn't be farther from the truth. This is a generation that wants to work with purpose. So great. Then the question becomes, great, this is a generation interested in meaning and purpose. How do you even achieve that? So the next lesson I learned is that you have to pursue what is meaningful to you. Not your friends on Facebook, not your parents, not your boss, maybe not even your current company, but what's meaningful to you. Because I went back and I interviewed my friend, that baller corporate lawyer, and I was like, man, you got it all figured out. You're living in New York, you got a sweet apartment, you got a great job, you're making all this money, you're married. What's your secret? Like, what am I doing wrong? And you know what he told me? That after 3 years of law school, getting a job at one of the top corporate firms in the country, making all this money, sweet apartment, that he was miserable in his job as a corporate lawyer. He still loved his wife, but he was miserable in his job as a corporate lawyer, and that he was going to go back to graduate school at the age of 30 to become a high school social studies teacher. So what's the lesson there? The grass is always greener. Stop comparing yourself to others. Start figuring out what it is you actually want. Why are you here? Not your friends on Facebook. Why are you here? And I went back and I read one of my favorite books, an amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Has anyone read that book? Highly recommended. Who is Viktor Frankl? Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who survived the Nazi Holocaust. He survived the concentration camp during which everyone around him was dying, including his family and his wife who was pregnant. So he writes this book about what allows people to keep going in the face of near certain death. And he writes that being human always points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself, be it a meaning to fulfill or another human being to encounter. The more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human he is. So that meaning comes not from what we've been told by society since we were kids, which is wealth, right, and accumulating all this stuff, but from giving it away, from service, from compassion, from sharing our gifts. And this doesn't mean we all have to go to the developing world and work in a small village, but it does mean we have to approach our work from a point of service. How can we share? How can we give? So the framework that I came up for in the book, because you can't really define something like meaning, right? Very mercurial concept, meaning, happiness. There's no real definition for something like meaning or fulfillment. But this is a framework that I came up with that seemed to kind of, a lot of the stories I was gathering kind of follow this. That meaningful work reflects who you are and what your interests are, allows you to share your gifts to help others, provides a community of believers that will support your dreams, and is financially viable given your desired lifestyle. And that last piece is really important, especially for millennials. Financially viable. We're talking about meaningful work, not how to take a meaningful vacation. Meaningful work has to support you. So that this allows us to ask the right questions. Maybe not come up with the answers today or tomorrow or even this year or in this job, but ask the right questions as we build our career and build a meaningful workplace. So for those of you that are more visual learners, this is about alignment. How can you align your unique gifts with the impact you want to have on the world? Surround yourself with a community that shares your values and believes in you and supports your desired quality of life. Now, the interesting thing about alignment is if that every single person in this room were to fill out this Venn diagram, which I encourage you all to do either later today or maybe even with your teams. I can send you a copy after today. Every single person in this room would have a different diagram, right? Because we're all different. We all have different gifts. We're all trying to make a different impact. We all have different skills we're sharing. We all have different definitions of community, who we care about, who we want to support, who makes us come alive. And we all have different standards for what quality of life means, how much time we want to spend with our families, how much time we want to spend doing health and wellness activities, how much salary we need, all of these things, because we're all different. So segueing this into what this applies to millennials in the workplace is Deloitte's recent millennial survey it's a global survey over 8,000 millennials from 30 different countries, found that millennials are looking for 4 main things in the workplace. A sense of meaning, right? The sense of purpose that was kind of lacking for me, even though I worked at the Peace Corps, an incredibly wonderful organization. The mission of the Peace Corps is to promote world peace and friendship, right? If I can't find that meaningful, what is meaningful? But the truth is it wasn't meaningful to me, so I still should leave. If you work at Google, an amazing company, and it's not the right fit, you should leave, and your supervisor should help you do so. So a sense of meaning, coaching and mentoring, learning, leadership development, and then of course flexible work, remote work, work-life balance. And when you talk about millennial engagement, this is from a book called When Millennials Take Over, an excellent book. They break it down into 4 main categories. Millennial engagement is digital. Of course, this is a generation of digital natives. It is clear. That is to say, it's transparent. Decisions get made not behind closed doors, but out in the open. This is very important, especially when I worked in government. Very difficult for someone entering the workforce to work in a system like government where you have no idea why things are happening. Just because someone's been there for 30 years, they get to make the decision. That doesn't make sense, right? What if someone has a better idea? You're sorry, you haven't been here for 30 years. You have a lower level, GS level next to your name. Sit down and shut up, right? That's not a very great culture. And millennial engagement is fluid, right? That is to say that things happen quickly, that decisions are not made, fluid is, in terms of how decisions are made, not in sense of a hierarchy, but they're more inclusive, right? And some people have taken fluidity to mean holacracy and kind of spreading out decision-making power, but at least we can say inclusive. I think the verdict's still out on holacracy. There's been some amazing examples of it working and amazing examples of it not working. But the idea is that millennials want a place where they're at the table, a voice, a seat at the table. That means even if you've been somewhere only for 1 month, you still matter. You might not get the final say, but you get some input. You get to make, you should just share your values, share your opinions. And that it's fast. Things happen quickly. Not in government where it takes 4, 5, 6 years. Hey, well, look at that next budget cycle. It's like, next budget cycle? Like, I'm going to be living across the country the next budget cycle, right? How can things happen fast? So then when you take this and kind of put it in a more overall employee engagement perspective, these are from an amazing employee engagement consulting firm, the Energy Project, which many of you are familiar with, Tony Schwartz. Employees are looking for 4 main things in the workplace. Purpose, again, the sense that their work matters. Value, the sense that they're being cared for by their supervisor. Renewal, the sense that you can take a break at work. Employees who take a break every 90 minutes report a 30% higher level of focus in their tasks. That is to say, employees that actually leave the office and do nothing, take a walk in the sun, meditate, get a cup of coffee with a friend, are actually going to be more productive and focus. Employees, 20% of employees that said they were able to focus on one task at a time at work were 50% more engaged. And this is incredibly, incredibly important for millennials, because as you know, millennials are not focused, right? Before I gave this presentation, I had, my Spotify going, iMessage, texting someone for later, sending a Gmail, looking at an article in the New York Times, and preparing for this talk. I was not focused. So how can you encourage your employees to do one task at a time? Maybe it's in an hour block, or hey, focus on this for the day, or this week, all of us in the office are going to be doing this one project. So you hear a lot about millennial turnover, and kind of this is just the job hopping generation. So when you look at the data, and this is from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, millennials are leaving their job about every 2 to 3 years on average, right? So they're not staying at their job long. The average job tenure of anyone from any generation, millennials, Gen X, boomers, is just about 5 years. Right? So in a way, the job market is a job market of job hoppers. Because of the new economy, rapid advances in technology, we're all having to change our jobs in 5 years. So what does that mean for how we approach careers? What does that mean for how we approach meaning in the workplace? 2/3 of millennials expect to leave their job by 2020. A Gallup study that was released just a couple weeks ago actually said that 50% of millennials expect to leave their job within the current year. Right? So how do we maximize for performance, productivity when people might leave? 60% of today's kids are going to end up in jobs that haven't been invented yet. 65% of today's kids that are in elementary school today are going to work a job we don't even know what the hell it is. Which, if you think about it, makes sense. Because about 10 years ago, I was in college and social media didn't really exist. Right? If you were to tell someone 10 years ago when I graduated, hey, I'm a social media analytics manager, you're like, what? What do you do? Think about those jobs that are going to exist in 10, 15 years. How do we prepare people for that? I think we need to make sure that people are more flexible, more adaptive, more experimentational in their work, in their careers, how they approach their work. Not as this idea of kind of one ladder that leads in one straight direction that you get on when you're 21 or when you pick a college major, but being more flexible to hop around. And so I come up with, this is me hopping around. We think of, normally you're taught about, climb the career ladder. The career ladder is dead. The corporate career ladder is probably even dead 10 years ago. It's certainly dead now. So I encourage young people I talk to and people of all ages to adopt a lily pad career mindset. What is a lily pad career mindset? This idea that there is no one direction up. Where are we going, right? To the age of 65 where you get to retire with a pension that might not exist, doing something you don't really want to do? No, but creating kind of a multitude of opportunities and experiences and projects and jobs that reflect what you care about, that reflect what's meaningful to you. Now, this doesn't mean you have to quit your job every 6 months. That's not a good strategy for you or for any company. Millennial turnover actually costs the United States economy $30 billion a year, which is something we should also talk about. But this idea that what's on the surface, if I'm here and things are going great, I'm at I'm at Peace Corps in Washington, D.C., working in international development, but I really want to become a writer, I really want to start writing more. Is moving to San Francisco to start writing going back down on the ladder? Is there a backwards? Right? Why can't I just hop over here if that's something I care about? Right? If I want to go volunteer in India for a nonprofit, why can't I just go like that? If I want to be working for a full-time job and launching a startup on the side, why can't I do that? So I think this is a much more nimble way of approaching our careers. And if you think about lily pads, they're all connected. The roots of the lily pads are all connected. That's what's meaningful to you. But the surface might look very different on the outside. And I think we need to encourage people to adopt this mindset. So how can you, when you're approaching your career and empowering your employees in the workplace, maximize the rate that they learn while minimize the rate of time it takes to try ideas? And this is a quote from one of my mentors, Tom Chi, who was on the original team that designed the Google Glass at Google X. Really smart way of rapid prototyping, but how can we apply rapid prototyping to careers, to internships, to giving people their first jobs, to giving people mid-level jobs? How can we give someone a 6-month term, a 1-year term while they get to try a lot of things, see if it's the right fit, see where they best fit within the company? So the greatest opportunity is to empower millennial talent, give them an opportunity to make an impact, not just on paper, but actually move the needle, actually lead to something that's changing the world, actually create a product that's making a difference in the lives of people. Provide skills and training, and this is a challenge. To provide skills and training when someone might leave in a year or 2 or 3 is expensive and risky. But I think there's a way to do it, to provide core skills and training, and accept that someone might leave in a couple years. There is a balance there. And give them the opportunity to reinvent their career so that you have HR systems that support the fact, hey, this is where you are on day 1. When you leave, you're going to be here because that's where you want to go. And we're going to help you do that. We're going to help you reinvent yourself. Your PD, your JD, your job description is going to change at month 6, month 12, month 18. And if you're still here in 4 or 5 years, it's definitely going to change. And a company that's not doing that is not maximizing the potential of their talent. So empower millennials, give them a sense of purpose, alignment with not only the role they have, the mission of the company, the team they're working in, the division, everything, total alignment. Give them a sense of value, mentorship, skills exchange, and co-leadership. What do I mean by co-leadership? That's this idea that you can pair someone who's early talent, someone that doesn't have a lot of experience, with someone that does, right? Pair a millennial with someone that has 5, 10, 15, 20 years more experience than they do, because that millennial might actually have some really interesting creative ideas, might have an understanding of social media, understanding of marketing that that person that's been at the company for 20 years just doesn't see. But you can best believe that the person that's been at the company for 20 years has a ton to teach someone that just got there. Right? But often these groups are working in silos. So you have all the younger, early talent here and all the people that are more senior here. This is a bad idea. Create opportunities for co-leadership on a project that's of paramount value to C-level folks and to the bottom line of the company. Autonomy, encourage career exploration, flexible remote work. This idea that work does not have to be tied to one desk, one computer, one boss, one place, but it can be more flexible. Give people an opportunity to experiment with their career and their work so that HR supports a 2 to 5 year learning journey. What I mean to say here is that HR recognizes the fact that someone is going to leave. They're going to leave. This could be a great thing. Make sure that the work that they do while they're here is amazing, and then yes, help them find the next position. Part of your job is to say, we want you to do a great job here, we want you to be aligned with your role, and we're going to help you go to another company. Yes, even if it's a competitor, because you're probably going to have a good sense of your work here. You're going to tell your friends maybe to come work here. You're going to have alignment with the brand. Maybe you keep buying our products. But this idea that kind of companies are not vying for the best talent as much as sharing the best talent. There has to be a collaborative way of doing that, right? If someone gets bored working one thing, they go on to the next best thing for them. Someone comes in and fill that role that's excited, that's pumped up, that's ready. Because if you want to see how this doesn't play out, go look at the United States government. Right? Where someone's been there for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, running out the clock, when they should, for their own sake, go find something else, and someone should come in and do that job even better. So empower millennials, give them frequent feedback, positive reinforcement. This idea that your supervisor is more than just a supervisor, but a mentor. It's not just your boss, but it's a life coach. It's someone you're looking to for life advice. Someone that knows who you are, who your family is, what your dreams are, what your aspirations are, beyond just what you're required to do in your position. Your values-aligned culture design. So this idea that people exactly know who you are, who you care about, what your dreams are, what you really want to do. Team building, design thinking. So this idea that you're kind of becoming a better employee, not just for your company while you're there, but you're becoming a better whole person, right? Wherever you work. Offer apprenticeships, experimentships, unpaid sabbaticals for purpose-driven projects. Give people the opportunity to travel, even if they're not getting paid, even if that's not under the auspices of the company. that would be a great opportunity for someone. It's still learning and growth. Inclusion over hierarchy. This idea of balance, or integration as some people say. Deliver employee perks that are tied to quality of life, renewal, creativity, play, focus, health, and wellness. This idea that when I was back in DC, I used to go for a run every night, I'm a runner, at 10 p.m. because that's when I got home. That is not healthy. There's no reason that I shouldn't have been able to go for a jog at 11 a.m. or noon or 1 p.m. or show up a little bit late to work in the morning to get my exercise in because I was going to do a better job if I went for a run, right? And this idea of community. Millennials are looking for exponential communities. What is an exponential community? An exponential community is like the one I talked about at Starting Block, that have exponential growth on the people that are a part of them. So when I went to that program, I was lost. I didn't like my job. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had an intention of maybe being a writer, maybe moving to San Francisco. After 5 days, I was introduced to all these different people. I had connections. I had job opportunities in San Francisco. People was like, hey, you should write for this blog and this blog. I was exponentially further along than where I was. So how can you create those exponential communities within your team at work and within the community you're part of, whether it's here in the Bay Area or in your city or your state or your country, creating those exponential networks that are not just about the project you're working on, but creating that kind of pool of talent, that pool of growth, that pool of believers that I talked about. So exponential communities that build diverse and dynamic networks. So this idea that HR is the new life coach. You know, when we think of HR, you kind of think of the TV show The Office. And it's like, oh man, Toby Flenderson, I gotta go see Toby in HR. Toby's the worst. Not anymore. In a millennial empowered workforce, and in 10 years, millennials will make up 75% of the workforce. They currently make up about 50%. HR is where it's at. HR is the cool kids, right? People wanna go see HR. HR knows exactly who someone is, why they're there, what they're gonna do in week 1, in month 3, in year 2, and in 6 years, having them even help them getting to that next job, right? So HR is a life coach. HR is actually helping people become their best selves, not only reach their potential within their company, but beyond. So millennials want exponential community. A millennial's wealth is measured not by their bank account, but by their community, by who they're a part of, by what events they go to, by who they know, by what kind of experiences they care about. So we always think about, this is not to say that millennials don't want salary, we do, but it's more important that people are part of a larger narrative, that they're part of something that says, hey, I'm a social entrepreneur, I identify with these types of communities. I'm a design thinker, I'm all about this. I'm all about empowering minorities in the workplace, that's a community that I'm a part of. Right? So millennials can measure their wealth not just by their bank account, by their community. So how can we make sure that this happens with our teams and with our companies? So be a brand with a mission, design culture that is more than just culture, right? Culture that goes beyond kind of the walls of our office, but is actually transforming people, the whole person, the individual, and what they're trying to do in the world. So how can you design culture that transforms employees and transforms the world? It is totally possible. How can you create communities within your teams and your companies that allow people to make the ask? So I'm going to tell a story about my friend Bernat. So a few years back, I was biking home one night in San Francisco, and all of a sudden, this random dude, Bernat, bikes alongside me. He's like, hey, my name's Bernat. How are you? I was like, I don't know, you leave me alone. Keeps biking alongside me. Hey, my name's Bernat, I'm here from Spain, I just moved here. I was like, leave me alone, like, I don't know you, random dude in San Francisco, leave me alone. Keeps biking alongside me, he's like, yeah man, I've just been, I'm here from Barcelona, I'm looking for a job in UX, I'm a UX UI designer, I'm trying to get a job here, there's no jobs in Spain. I was like, huh, that's interesting, like one of my best friends lives in Barcelona, I just visited him last year, it's such a beautiful city. He goes, yeah, you know, there's brutal unemployment in Spain. I can't get a job there. I've had 6 interviews this week. You know, what are you working on? And I was like, oh, well, you know, I'm working on this book. And he's just, do you have a cover designer? I was like, no. I'm like, oh, cool. Well, maybe I'll go home and check out your website. So I go home, I check out this guy's website. I was like, man, this guy's a really kick-ass UX designer. He's really good. So I post on Facebook, I say, hey, just met this crazy weirdo, Bernat, biking home. He's here from Spain, he's here from Barcelona, he's looking for a job in UX UI. You know, does anyone know of anything? I know a lot of people in the startup space. And about 5 minutes later, my buddy Yi comments, he's like, oh, you know, Bernat should talk to my friend Mark. They're doing this mobile startup in Palo Alto. They don't really know what's going on. They don't have a designer yet. I think they're looking for a lead designer. There's like 5 of them. They're clueless, whatever. So Bernat meets with the team the next week. They hit it off. He gets hired to be the lead designer for the team. He gets a work visa, which allows him to stay in the United States, get a job, and he reaches out to me and is like, thanks, man. He ends up designing my book cover. I was like, that's awesome. And then I don't hear from him for like 8 months. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I get a text message from Bernat, and he's like, Smiley, I'm taking you out to dinner anywhere you want to go. I was like, sweet. Like, this point, I was just, starting to write. I was like, I'm broke. Like, I'd love to get taken out to dinner. Like, this is great. So we go to Foreign Cinema, like, really nice place. I got the fried chicken. Like, we got a couple bottles of wine. And I was like, Bernat, what's the deal here? Like, we can split the check. Like, you don't have to take me out to dinner. It turns out that the mobile startup that you had just been working for, called Aviate, had just been acquired by Yahoo for $80 million. Right? And he was the 5th employee, lead designer. He had equity in the company. He definitely could take me out to dinner. And he was like, Smiley, thank you. And I was like, hey, thank you. Because Bernat made the ask, right? This guy talked to a random stranger in a city he didn't live in a country he wasn't even from, on a bicycle. Like, who does that, right? So how can we empower our employees, or especially early talent, to come into our offices, to come into our teams and make the ask? Whatever that is, even if it's something risky, even if it's saying, hey, there's not a lot of people that look like me on this team, we need to do something about that, right? Allow people to kind of make those radically honest, authentic asks, because that's going to make our cultures, our teams, our companies better. So, we are not the me generation. We are the purpose generation. And I believe that we'll be engaged with our work because we have to be. The challenges facing our generation are simply too serious to ignore. They're too serious to only worry about Friday evening or Saturday morning or after 5 o'clock, right? So we can't be stuck in a quarter-life crisis, a third-life crisis, or a midlife crisis. We can't climb the career ladder to nowhere because the stakes are too damn high. Thank you.